now in program for 10 years. In Alateen, when you turn 21, you're supposed to transition from Alateen to Al-Anon. And it's always a really hard process because it's about that age where you're too old to relate to the Alateen meetings, but almost too young to relate to Al-Anon meetings. And so a lot of us get lost in the process. But fortunately, upon entering Alateen, I started service immediately after going to my first convention, which was NOCAC, the Northern California Alateen Conference, which is held every year in November. And most of the time it's in Modesto. And so after that, I got into service, and I've been in Alateen ever since. Upon some tragic events in my life, I stopped going to program for a couple of years. But I'm back, and when I came back to NOCAC, was my first program thing that I came back to. It wasn't a meeting. And immediately I got back into on committee, and so I was able to kind of write out, even though I turned 21 while I was on NOCAC committee, and so I got to stay and write it out a little longer. And upon leaving NOCAC, I got my first sponsor ever in program, and that's what kept me into Al-Anon. So I have a sponsor now. I work the steps, and I'm an active member of Al-Anon and a grateful member. And so I wanted to read you this page. This is the page that speaks out to me. And it's from the Daily Reader, May 22nd. I used to think that if I ever looked carefully at myself, my secret fears would be confirmed. I'd see that I am hopelessly flawed and unworthy. Al-Anon has shown me that if I face the effects of alcoholism by working the step, this belief will fade away. I see the truth I've avoided is my own inner beauty. I am powerless to change the fact that alcoholism has affected my life. Only a power greater than myself can overcome the effects of this disease. I call upon that power for help with the second and third steps. These steps help me to trust that, although the ground on which I stand may quiver, I will not fall. For I am held firmly by one whose will is not so easily overturned. Regardless of how shaky I may feel, I am safe. Such a spiritual foundation makes a truly searching and fearless moral inventory possible. Only when I risk taking a close look at myself can my fears give away the truth. As a child of God, I am all that I need to be, loving, lovable, and splendid. Today's reminder. Today, I will take some time to strengthen my relationship with my higher power. This will bring me closer to seeing the truth as my ally and recognizing my own inner loveliness. I now choose to rise above my personality problems, to recognize the magnificence of my being. I am totally willing to learn to love myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Okay, now I am going to introduce our Al-Anon speaker. And our Al-Anon speaker is a very interesting lady. I got the great pleasure, yes, she is, the great pleasure of sitting with her during one of the assemblies and getting to know her some more, and also just being around her in the assemblies when we were having a voting assembly, and I saw a lot of my fellow members and trying to get elected into positions, into service positions, and Yvonne stood for several different positions, and now she's our area chair. So I'm really grateful that she chose to do the service today and come here and speak for us. So may I please present to you Yvonne.
Singing.
Stand back. Just stand back.
Right. Hi, my name is Yvonne. Can you hear me? I'll try not to make this microphone whistle. I'm a grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon and Alateen, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And today I can say it's a privilege to do service. I used to have to do things. I don't have to do things anymore. The world does not revolve around me, and I'm not the belly button of the world. So I wanted to start talking a little bit about the traditions and interweave my story in there. And as this is called Unity Day, Tradition 1, the spiritual principle of Tradition 1 is unity. And it's a state of being undivided or unbroken, not separated into parts. For me, coming into this program, I was taught that it's a disease of the body, mind, and the spirit. I don't have the allergy of the body, but I do have the disease in the mind and the spirit. And I do have an obsession, and it's not alcohol, but it would be the alcoholic or anything else in this world that I think is going to make me feel good or is going to make me feel better how I feel inside. Because the only thing I want is to feel different than how I naturally feel inside. I want to get out of my feelings as fast and as quickly as I can, and if that has to be through you or through something or through a pair of boots that is $300 that makes me feel I have some self-worth because now I'm worth $300, don't you know? I will do that. I will do that. Drugs and alcohol doesn't work for me, unfortunately, because I would have tried that. I wake up and I remember everything. I've always wanted to have a blackout. And say, oh yeah, I can't remember. But instead of that, I became a bartender at an early young age. I was 18 and I became a bartender. And I was affected by growing up in the disease of alcoholism. And this is not about the alcoholic, this is about how am I affected by the disease of alcoholism? What are my character defects? How does my disease affect my life? And how does it affect everybody around me? And so, getting back to Tradition 1, Al-Anon taught me that I don't always have to win or lose. Sometimes I can just participate. I don't know how to participate. I don't know how to be a part of something. I know how to be apart from, separate, on the sidelines. I'll be a part of something if I can be the leader. Otherwise, I'm not going to be a part of anything because you need to be a part of me and you need to do what I want you to do, and otherwise it ain't happening. And so, Tradition 1 taught me what unity was, and I discovered that when I started working the steps, that my body, mind, and spirit was never in the same room. My body was running so hard, so fast, so my spirit and my mind could not catch up with me. My mind was so busy trying to figure things out and trying to anticipate what was going to happen that it was always busy, it was always on. 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and your brain already is like 5 minutes ahead of you and you're catching up in your own thoughts. I mean, really, I call it spinning. And then my spirit, there was no spirit. I came in with life, but I wasn't living life. I had one, but I wasn't living it. And so my spirit was dying. There was none. And so I was born and raised in the Netherlands. Just in case you wonder about the accent and you have some obsessive thinking trying to figure it out, there it is. And I did not come to the United States until I was 32 years old. And growing up in the disease of alcoholism, there was a lot of black and white thinking in my family, and predominantly my dad. He was very black and white. My mom was wishy-washy. My mom would go with her emotions. She was like a roller coaster. You never knew what was when and how, and what was okay in the morning was not okay in the evening. And, it all depended on her mood. And I learned that I had some control over mom's moods. I learned how to make her happy. I learned how to do what she expected me to do. So now I thought I had some control, and now I had some power. And I knew I could tee her off. I knew how to make her angry, and that gave me some power too. Now, my dad was a whole different ballgame. My dad was a merchant marine, and he decided to come home when I was about 8 years old and work ashore. My mom was complaining, and I was sort of ruling the house because I sort of had mom wrapped around my finger. And so here's this man that enters the house, and all of a sudden it's his rules, and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think so. I've been here for 8 years now. I'm like, no, you can't just come in here and change my life. And he's like, oh yeah, we're going to change that. We're going to change that right now. And one of our fights was about food. I was used to being fed what I wanted when I wanted it, and my dad wasn't going to cater to that. And so my usual thing was like, yeah, I don't want it. I don't like this. I don't want to eat. And my mom would go, oh, but she has to eat. And my dad goes, she eats when she's hungry. And I'm like, really? I'm not going to be hungry then. And so I didn't eat. And the next day I was sitting at the dining room table and I didn't eat. And I would sit there until bedtime would come around. And so finally he looks at me and he said, if you think this food is going to go off, you got another thing coming because your mother already shopped for the same food and you're going to keep eating the same dish until you eat it. And I can tell you, there was no cookies, there was no apple, there was no sandwich. It was dinner table, bed, and we're going to do this again the next day. So needless to say, sooner or later, I traveled the whole house. I've ate on the hallway, I've ate on the stairs, I ate in the bathroom, I ate in the toilet, I've ate everywhere. And And it was as if he could read my mind. He said, when you're in the toilet, don't even think about it. And I'm like, okay. So it was very interesting. And boundaries, we didn't have boundaries, we had walls. And my dad's boundaries were unflexible. I would come home and I was about 2 minutes late and he would go, "You were late?" I'm like, "No, I wasn't." "Yeah, you were." "No, I wasn't." He goes, I said, 2 minutes, really? And he goes, "Yeah, really?" He said, "Does the border between Canada and the United States get moved by a couple of yards? Ever so often?" "No." "Okay, you've got 2 months of grounding." Because see, my punishment started at 2 months of grounding and up from there. So I spent a lot of time in my head, I spent a lot of time in my room, and I'm an only child, so I'm it. Don't get to blame anybody. I'm the only one to play with, And that triangle that we have, if you only work half of it, you got that on your forehead. So, that's what I learned once. And so I had that half growing up because they would play games and they would play adult games. And I forgot that I was a kid. And I was playing adult games when I was a kid. And so I could never win. And so one of the things that in our house happened that there was no unity. We would switch sides. We would get into an argument. We call it triangulation. I would start off being on dad's side, and then I would switch to mom, and I would start out with mom, and I would switch to dad, and my dad would do it, my mom would do it, and we would all do it because we all wanted out for one thing. What can I get out of this situation? And how can I win? And how can I get what I need? And so I learned early on how to take care of my needs. I just didn't have any. I thought, good, got that done. And then I shut down my feelings because they got in the way. My feelings got in the way. They make me feel vulnerable and they make me feel scared, and I thought, I have no use for those. So I shut those down. And when I shut those feelings down, I stopped growing emotionally. And the other thing that I learned in my house, that today's information is tomorrow's ammunition. I ain't gonna tell you nothing. I wanna know everything about you, because I gather ammunition. I've got filing cabinet. And so as I grew up, I had less and less to say. And I was always focused on you. I needed to know what your character defects were. I needed to know what you were up to. I needed to know what you were planning. I didn't care about your good sides. I didn't care about your assets. Because see, they won't hurt me, but your defects did. And I needed to know that. And so I was focused outside of myself. And I tried to fix what was wrong inside by fixing everything on the outside. And needless to say, it wasn't working. And then I started filling up that big hole that I had in my gut. I started filling it up with money, property, and prestige. And that wasn't working. Well, it worked for a while. It works in the moment, but you have to keep feeding it. And and so I become a workaholic because that's what I'm good at. I'm a great bartender. Little did I know why I was a great bartender. And I started putting money into that hole. And it would just turn into nothing. And then the next day I get up and I need to put something in that hole. One of the things I would put in there was anger. That was the one emotion that I did well. I felt anger. And anger made me feel big and strong because it gave me adrenaline, and that's the drug of my choice. Growing up in an alcoholic family, there's drama, there's tension, there's all sorts of good stuff, especially if there's active stuff going on. Middle of the night. I love the middle of the night. I love being awake in the middle of the night. One of the things you get older is that you can't do that anymore. And so, adrenaline, it's not hard to find, And I look for those who know what I go through, and I look for those who get me. And who gets me is those who've lived like I lived. And those who grew up the way I grew up. Those who know about alcoholism. And when I came into this program, I was told, the drinking is but one symptom. I'm like, really? It's a big one, though. And I thought, well, if that's one symptom, then what are the other 99? I was really curious. Well, I've got the other 99. I don't have that one that makes you look bad. I've got the other 99 that makes me look good, depending how I act out and react. And so what do they look like? In my house there was no dealing, no feeling, no talking, a lot of guilt, anger, and isolation. Those were the things I learned. I didn't know how to communicate. I know how to react. I don't know how to act. I know how to be angry. I know how to put anger out there. I know how to put force out there. I had a potty mouth. And I needed to look at my language when I came into Al-Anon. Why do I talk like the way I talk? Because I had to put a boundary and I had to do it forcefully. And if you thought I was a bitch, good, then you would walk around me and have some respect for me. Because I had no boundaries. I was scared. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. So I became arrogant, and I would ignore you, and I would be forceful in my talk, and I would be angry. And I would rage if that was wanted or required, according to me. I never took my own inventory, but I took yours. And as the world changed, my values changed. I would just toss them out of the door because I don't need them. But then when you would come home, I would lecture you about the values. I'm like, hey, let me lecture you about some principles here. And I learned in this program that that's not how that works. In this program, when I started working the steps and the traditions and the concepts, I learned about principles, and I learned how I base my values on those principles, because principles don't change, my values do. I have choice over my values and what I put on those values. And so one of the things is that the steps show me how to love myself, the traditions show me how to love others, and the concepts show me how to love the world I live in. And I didn't love me, I didn't love you, and I definitely didn't like the world I was living in, because it wasn't going the way I needed it to go. And so my mother's skills were the silent treatment. And I learned how to ignore people, and I learned how to give you the silent treatment. I could do that for weeks, and it always worked. It always worked. I always got a response. Not the one I wanted, but I got a response. And my dad, on the other hand, would cut you out of his life. If he perceived that you crossed his principles, that was it. You were done. You were dead, and you were never going to be spoken to again. And those were my tools. That's what I took. Now, guess what? I drew up those walls, and I started living behind them because I had to keep you out. What I didn't know is that I got stuck behind those because you could not come in. And it was lonely. And I started living in the prison of my mind. I was not happy, I was not joyous, and I definitely was not free. I was trapped in the bondage of self. And so I had no direction. I took direction of what you wanted. You say yes, I say no. You say black, I say white. So that was all I did. I never made a decision about my life. Hence, I was a victim. And in my victimhood, there's three participants. That would be me, the victim. That would be you, the perpetrator. And that would be the rescuer. Thank God. The one that's going to do for me that I'm perfectly capable of doing for myself, but I don't want to. Because I think I can't. Because my self-esteem and self-worth makes me believe that I can't do things, and I'm too stupid, and I'm not good enough. And so I become an imposter. And if you would only get to know me, you would know, and you can fill it in. You could fill it in. I think every little thing. I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't talk good enough, my English is not good enough. I mean, you name it, I've got it going on. I've got it going on. And so it was always hard to be me because I didn't know who that was. Who would you like me to be? That's who I was. My sponsor called me a prostitute once and immediately said, but. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get it. Because I would prostitute my soul to whoever wanted to have it. And today I know that no matter what I owe you, I don't owe you my soul. That's what Al-Anon teaches me. It's hard sometimes because I still would like to do what you want me to do so you can like me and then you maybe accept me. And this program taught me that no matter how much I want to be loved and accepted, because that's the only thing I wanted to belong somewhere. And I just didn't feel I belonged anywhere. I grew up, my mother was from Germany, my father was from Indonesia, and here I'm born in the Netherlands. I didn't belong to the Indonesian culture because I did not have black hair and brown eyes. And I didn't belong to Germany because, the Netherlands, I mean, really? They got occupied for 5 years by Germany. I'm like, yay, win-win. My father was raised in the Japanese concentration camps, and my mother was a survivor of World War II Germany, and also an incest survivor by her own father. And that's what they taught me, war. They taught me war. They taught me how to prosecute. They taught me how to hold resentments. They taught me a lot of things. And one of the things that I learned from my father was that when I was young and I went to elementary school, I had these pigtails, these long pigtails. The boys would tease me, and I was fed up with it. And I came home one day and I was crying. And early on I had learned not to cry. And he says, what you crying about? He said, stop it. I'll give you something to cry about. I'm like, I said, well, that boy and blah, 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 blah. He said, yeah, you don't get it, do you now? I'm like, did I miss something? He said, look, you got to get back at him. I'm like, yeah, but he's bigger and stronger. He goes, so? I'm like, so what so? He says, well, you have to wait. Wait until he forgets. And when he forgets, you jump him. And you just beat the out of him. All right, I had a mission now. I had some direction, so I went to school. I think it took 6 weeks or 2 months. I mean, it's hard to say, but it was weeks. And I'm nurturing that little resentment. Every day I get up and I take that little resentment and I feed it and I nurture it. It was my pet. It was my pet. Because you put obsession and anger together and you get a resentment. That's the two components I need to get a resentment. So one day I'm looking at this boy and we're walking to the hallways and it was totally quiet and I'm looking at him and bam, my lights just went out. That anger just took over and I jumped him and my mother got a call can you come to the school because we cannot get your daughter off this boy. Needless to say, I got a lot of writing and a lot of detention for that, and I go home and I'm crying because I'm like, my life is over, because everything with me is forever. It still sometimes is. My life is over. My dad comes home and he goes, now what? I said, well, I did what you told me to do. He said, yeah. I said, well, then look what I have to do. And he goes, yeah, but was it good? I'm like, oh, yeah. So I took that in my life. That was a handy tool. I used that a lot. I learned how to undermine people. I learned how to trip you up. And so, 17 comes around, nothing but arguments in the house. My mom tries to control me by opening my mail, listening to my door, listening to my phone calls. It was just chaos. My father's trying to control me by physically to ground me. Or money punishments. Yeah, once grounding didn't work anymore because I'd figured out how to be alone. I'd figured out what would make me happy sitting in my room all by myself. So I would read books. All my friends lived in books and they were always there. They didn't talk back to me. This was great. Ooh, my friends. I would travel in books. It wasn't like I was in that room anymore. So he looked at me one day and he said, you know, that's not working so well for me anymore. He said, you got used to that. He said, from now on, I'm going to get you where it hurts. I said, and where would that be? He said, in your wallet. Oh, because now I was 14 and I had a job. He said, I'm going to take your money. He said, so every time you don't listen and leave the lights on and the doors open, he said, it's $5 and it doubles. 520, 20, 40, 40, 80, 160. And then I hit 320. Yeah. And I had to pay. And I found out how it was to not be grounded, to be allowed to do whatever you want to do, but have no money. And again, I find myself in my room because I couldn't leave. I had no money, so I couldn't go out. So those were the things I learned. And so I took those tools into my relationships. And needless to say, my relationships were not working so well for me because I give you the silent treatment and I cut you out of my life and I don't trust. I don't even trust myself to take care of myself. And I learned that in Al-Anon because I thought I was the only one I could trust. And I would never write anything down. I would never tell anybody anything because if it was in my head, it was safe and you couldn't use it against me. And so here I go and I become a bartender. And now I'm really good at what I do. And so I'm living in the nightlife, and needless to say, I didn't know, but I became a bartender because a boyfriend, who became my ex-boyfriend in that moment, didn't like that I had gone to Spain for 2 or 3 months. And so I come back and he looks at me and he goes, so what you gonna do now? I said, well, I don't know, because I was out of school, 17, like, what am I gonna do now, 18? He said, well, why don't you go work in the bar around the corner? I looked at him and I thought, I can do that. That happened to be your favorite bar. So I walked out of his store, walked around the corner, applied in the bar, lied my way into it, and now I was a bartender. And here comes the weekend, and he comes in, and I looked at him, and he was pissed, because he was jealous. I knew how to get him pissed. Well, I had to doorman remove him from the bar, and I thought that was just fabulous. Got him banned for at least 2 months. I thought, hey, I like this. So, started my career as a bartender, and I can't say whether my boyfriends were alcoholics or not, but I can tell you the behavior was not normal. When my boyfriend comes in at 4 o'clock in the morning and he's looking through the window of my house, the front door, and I'm like, what are you doing? Shh. I'm like, what do you mean, shh? He goes, I just outran the cops. He said, and my name is not on this house because you live here. He says, fun. I can see him cruising around looking for me, but they can't find me. Oh, and I would go back to bed. Normal. Not normal. Come on, not normal, So there came a point in my life that my life wasn't working anymore. And I'm a one-trick pony. It's fight or flight. I didn't know it was a one-trick pony. I thought it was complicated, but no, I was a one-trick pony. I decided that I needed to think, like I've done before. I need to think, I need just to make a decision, put my life back on the rails, and then we can go forward. And so at that point I was 32, and a friend of mine says, let's go to the United States for a couple of months and just bum around like we used to do. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's bum around, So I was in between jobs, and I landed myself in Miami in the middle of the night. I can tell you that was not a good idea. I did not know anything about the United States. I did not know anything about Miami. I did not know anything about gangs, nothing. I thought I could go, all I knew is the stores are open 24 hours and I wanted to go out on the streets and walk to the store, and this is not a good idea. I'm like, why not? We'll take you with the shuttle. And I got to experience what it was to be in Miami. And from Miami, I ended up in Key West because it was familiar to me. It was a small town with a cosmopolitan feel. Everybody rode a bicycle, like in the Netherlands. And I thought, well, let's just go to the beach here and let's just relax and make a decision. It's been a long road to this beach. And so I lay on the beach, and the next thing I know, I wasn't even for 5 minutes, and I hear this voice, this guy, he said, "Hi, my name is, and I'm collecting autographs for the Guinness World Book of Records for the most autographs collected by an individual." I'm like, "Oh, interesting." I open my eyes, I see a six-pack. I'm like, "Wow, interesting." And I decided to stay. I fell in love and I decided to stay. So I stayed in the United States. I stayed in Key West and I lived there for 7 years. Needless to say, him and I weren't working out because I tried everything, but it wasn't working. You know, he did whatever he wanted to do and he didn't what I wanted him to do. And so I had a cousin in California. And so I end up in California because they just said, "Why don't you come by?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I go to California and I'm living with my cousin. I'm taking care of his 2 babies. And at that point in life, I was done with life. I would go to bed at 8 o'clock in the evening. I would get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had no desire to leave the house. I had no desire to talk to anybody. I was done. I was just done. I was tired of people, places, and things. And one day I went back to Europe. And my friends were like, "Come on, Yvonne. You've had a vacation long enough. Come on, you got to come back here. We got a job for you. We got a house. We've got a restaurant." Because now everybody owns their own restaurant. And I'm like, "I got to go." I couldn't stay, and I got here and I couldn't sleep, and I thought, "Oh my God, if I don't do what they want me to do, then what if I get into trouble and I want to come back? They're going to say, 'Well, I told you so. You should have done that.'" And I didn't know that was my mother's voice in my head. They would have never told me that. I didn't know that. I had a lot of voices in my head. And I'm not schizophrenic, by the way. So through a series of events and a therapist, I found Al-Anon. And I come into program, and my first meeting was on control. And I related to everything, and I thought, wow, somebody must have tipped them off that I was coming. And I got to be of service early on in my program. And Al-Anon started giving me some direction, because the spiritual principle of tradition too is direction. The place towards which a person or thing is directed, a line of action, a continuous passage or progress through time, or a succession of stages. When I think of my higher power, I recognize that in his love, he gives me free will and allows me to make my own decisions, even though they are frequently wrong. And he allows me the privilege of suffering or enjoying the consequences of my behavior. This tradition helps me to keep my priorities in order: God, self, family, and others. It also reminds me that each person in my life has a God and I'm not it. And that was a hard one to swallow. I'm still working on that one from time to time. But I got some direction. I've got direction, and all of a sudden I had a purpose. Because see, I didn't know what my purpose was on earth. I didn't know why I was put here. I was like, well, I don't know. You know, it used to make me cry. Alone, mind you. You were never going to see me cry. And today, you know, when I go to the rooms of Al-Anon, I get to laugh with you together what I used to cry about alone. And I don't have to do that anymore. And so I got direction. I got to be of service, because my primary spiritual aim is to be of service to those who are affected by the disease of alcoholism and to carry the message. And I know that to carry the message is of vital importance, but you know what? There's also the service structure that we need to maintain, because without the structure that you guys in AA as well as we in Al-Anon have, there is no message. And we too, I'm just going to hook into a conversation that was earlier about the money, the declining contributions, you know, in Al-Anon, that's happening too. We need to let people go on WSO. So we are linked together, you know, our programs are linked together. It is a family disease. And the way I found out that it was a family disease is there was this big mobile once hanging from the ceiling, and somebody says, "Do you know why it's a family disease?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what they say." And she flicks one of those little animals over here, and the whole thing starts going like that. And it taught me that I don't have to live with the alcoholic. When I came in, there was no alcoholic in my life. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired of me, because my life was so crazy because I was crazy. And I couldn't get away from the crazies. What I didn't know is that from how Al-Anon works, all of this comes from our literature, by the way. Emotional survival skills can also alter the way we see past events and relationships. When memories of horrors from the past are too shocking or painful, we may unconsciously block them out. We simply don't remember. Even if we fervently wish we could remember, these memories remain locked away, continuing to control our lives by limiting or altering our behavior. Without being aware of it, we continue to react to the traumatic events of our past rather than to the reality of our lives. See, I never lived in reality. I was either reacting to my past or I was reacting to my fantasy. Because see, I make up stories. I make up stories that I know what you're thinking, I know what you're doing, I know exactly where you're at. And if the boyfriend doesn't call me at a certain time that he's supposed to call me, I'm on my way to his house and I'm developed the attitude along the way, and then I get the anger because I'm going to set a boundary and I'm going to scare the shit out of him. So he opens the door and I'm in his face. And he's like, what? That's what I do. I make up stories about everybody and everything. And tell you what, my stories don't end well. I don't know about you, but mine don't end well. They don't have happy endings. So reality is much better than my stories, and I have to be aware of that. And I became aware of that by working the 4-step. You know, in step 1, that one, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol. It's like I'm admitted I'm powerless over people, places, and things. That's what we say in Al-Anon. And hence my life has become unmanageable. I admitted I'm powerless means step back. Just step back and take your hands out of the pie, off of the person, off of the thing. And then my life has become unmanageable means shut up. I need to shut up. And if I can do those 2 things, I can give God the opportunity to come in and do some miracles. And so I get to go to step 2 because then I get to see God. If I can do that, I get to see God. And when I get to see God, I go, oh. And then there comes the question in step 3. Turn my will and my life over to the care of God, my thoughts and my actions. Because my thoughts is my self-will and my actions is because of my actions that I did or did not take is where I am today. Well, they could use some help, I knew that. Will and life wasn't working for me, but thoughts and actions was working for me. Somebody had to translate that. And so I get to look at that 3rd-step prayer. And I get to take that 3rd-step prayer and I get to really pull that apart and see what does that mean to me, because a prayer for me is saying somebody else's words. What do I know about somebody else's words? I need to know exactly what those words mean, so I get to dissect that prayer. And I did that. And because of that, I had a spiritual experience. And then I get to go to step 4. Step 4 is my favorite step. Because see, step 4, unfortunately, I got to discover I wasn't the woman who I thought I was. And thank God I got to discover that I wasn't the woman that I thought I was. And I thought, wow. So now I know a little bit about myself. And I get to tell that to another human being, and I get to have the experience that I'm still accepted and I'm still loved. And then I get to live it in step 6. Because I have to have a visual experience. I don't know about you, but I don't learn by something that you tell me. You can tell me anything, but that goes in one ear and out the other. I like 2x4s personally. And so I get to live it in step 6. And I get to have that pain of what those character defects do in my life and how I act out in my life. And how tired I am of doing everything and anything and being everything and anything to everybody. And in the meantime, I'm nothing to nobody. And I'm a nothing. Because I can't even be anything to you, so I can't be anything to myself. Because it starts with me. And then I finally, when I'm on my knees, I get to go to 7. And you know, God in my life works miracles, but I do have to do the footwork, so I can just say, okay, God, take him away and nothing happens. I do have to participate in that process. And how I participate with that is I start to focus on my assets instead of my defects. Which is really hard for me because that muscle of assets is totally not developed. But now I get to solve problems with my assets instead of my defects. And I have to call my sponsor for that because I have no idea how that works. I know the word kindness, but what does that look like? Really, in action, what does that look like? Because this is a program of action. And see, my favorite thing is to sit on the couch and fantasize about, or think about what I'm going to be doing, or think about how this is going to work out. You know, and I know knowledge without action is fantasy. That's what I was told in this program. It's not until I have an experience, and for an experience I need to actually get off the couch, leave the house, and have an experience, good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter, or I have nothing to say, I have nothing to give. And so, I had to get out of my isolation. And I discovered in my 4th step the reason why I isolate is because my self-esteem was reflected in everybody else's eyes, and that was very painful on certain days. Because if you didn't respond to me, hey, how you doing? Ooh, I was spun. But you could just be having a bad day. And today I know that what you do has nothing to do with me. I can't make you happy, and I can't make you unhappy. I do have power over my responses. I have power over how I react to the feelings that I'm feeling. And my feelings are not always facts. And sometimes I need somebody else to tell me that. And so I don't have to react to those emotions from way long ago because I've identified them in step 4. And one of the things that was in my house was emotional incest. Emotional incest. My mother made me the adult that I wasn't. She made me the sister she didn't have. She made me the mother that wasn't around. She made me the husband that wasn't around. And she would tell me things that no kid would hear or should have to experience. Crying on my shoulder is not acceptable when I'm a little kid, when I'm little. And my dad did the same thing. I was a spunky wife he didn't have. I was the one that was willing to fight with him. And so, relationships, boundaries, how far do I let somebody in today? And limits, how far do I extend myself? And this is about my hula hoop. How far do I let you in? And how far do I extend myself out of my hula hoop? Well, I was so far out of my hula hoop, I couldn't even see my hula hoop anymore. And so I get to do service. And in service, I get to do the action part of this program. And I get to get out of my mind. I get to get out of my head. Sorry, I'm always out of my mind, but I get to get out of my head. And when I get out of my head, God can come in and work some miracles. And I get relief. It's the relief of being able to breathe for 5 or 10 minutes. When I'm not obsessing and I'm not thinking about my problem and I don't think everybody's out to get me and nobody likes me anyway, so I might as well just act out and I might as well be the bitch that I can be, because you're going to reject me anyway and I will reject you before you reject me at any time, because abandonment is the part of my family that I experienced, because my father disinherited me when I was, 35. I was never to be born, I was never to be seen, I was never to be mentioned again. My name will be forever stricken out of whatever books. Everything is my fault. See you later. That's the short version. I'm an only child. And people go, wow, you're an only child. I'm like, yeah, check that out. How do you feel about that? What do you mean, how do I feel about that? So, that's who he is. Hey, no big deal. It's what I'm used to. It took me 10 years to have a feeling about that. It took me 10 years to actually have a feeling about that letter. That's how good I was at shutting down those feelings. And so I came to Al-Anon and I didn't talk, and I participated, but I didn't talk, not in the meetings. And so I got to do Alateen, and I went into Alateen service. And Alateen, I came in and I was about between the ages of 8 and 15, emotionally and mentally, most of the time. And so I get to go in Alateen, and Alateen, it was great. Potty mouth, and we're smoking, and we're hanging out, and we can lay on the floor, and we don't have to behave, because in Al-Anon it's like, oh, you're gonna have emphysema soon. So I was always happy to come to an AA event. It's like, woo, I can smoke with everybody else, and we're all happy about smoking. I did stop smoking, but in Alateen I learned how to set boundaries, and Alateen taught me how to be the adult in the room. I could not be the Alateen, I was supposed to be the adult, so I had to figure out, what does that look like? And at one event, me and Veronica were talking about that. I kicked Veronica out of Alateen several times, off of committees. And the first time she was about 15, I think, and it's 12 o'clock midnight and no Veronica. So I figure out where she is and I get a hold of her. So what you doing? I was hungry. What? You could have told us. I said, I can't take care of you if I don't know where you are. I said, can you come back to the hotel? And she did. And I had a sponsor and a co-sponsor and an Alateen chair and an Alateen co-chair. And I'm thinking, well, one of those is going to tell her she needs to go. I was just a chair for the convention. And everybody in the hallway goes. And I'm like, whoa. And I just told her that this morning. She didn't even know that. I thought, whoa, crap. Oh, that's it. I'm done in Alateen. They're going to hate me now. Oh, that's it. Done. And I said, you got to go home because you can't be here. You know the guidelines. And you're going to call your mother? Do I have to do that for you? And she goes, I'll call my mom. And she told her mom the truth, and she went home. And I thought, that's it. I'm done in Alateen. And Alateen was where I lived. It was my passion. And then there came the next event, and here comes Veronica. And she sees me across the room, and she just comes running over to me. Yvonne! And she gives me this big hug. She taught me that it's okay to set a boundary. And it's okay to take care of me. And it's okay to take care of other people by setting boundaries and telling the truth. And I'm still lovable. And so that was the first time that I experienced that. And so I grew up in Alateen, and I did that for 10 years. And besides that, I'm the chair for Northern California. My passion today is going into the institutions. I go into the state prisons of Northern California. I started the meetings together with Luis Morimoto in the state prisons of Northern California about 4 years ago. And we walk into those prisons, and I thought, whoa, this is going to be way too soft for these guys. And I look at Dan. Dan goes, Yvonne, I'm scared. He goes, we're going to be, Al-Anon's too soft for them. I'm like, well, we'll find out soon. We had 2 meetings and 5 guys in each meeting. And one of those guys is sitting there, and he's got his arms in front of me. You don't have to uncross your arms. It's okay. He's got his arms like that, and he's got no feelings in his eyes. He's got that wall up, and he's just looking like that. And he says, you know what? I know who I am, and nobody's going to tell me who. I'm like, whoa, a little bit of an attitude going on. And while I was watching him, and I thought, oh, wow, is that what my walls look like? Is that what that looked like? I recognized myself. Because, see, I lived in the prison of my mind my whole life. I have never been in a penitentiary, but I know how it is to be locked up because my dad had the mentality, my mom knows it, and it was in my house. And I spent a lot of time alone in my head. There was no freedom for me, and I saw those walls and I thought, wow, I gotta drop these walls right now, right here. So I dropped those walls and I unzipped my little zipper, not literally, figuratively speaking, and I let them into my life and I tell them exactly who I am and how I feel and what works for me and what doesn't. And so the next Sunday we go back, and I forgot my ID, so I had to go back home, and we told Dan, we'll see you in about half an hour, go on in. And he, oh, okay. And we got back just before the meeting ending, and that same guy, his lights are on in his eyes, like we just gave him a big fat red fire truck. He was like, oh. And I look at him, and he's shaking Dan's hand, and he's shaking my hand, and I look at Dan, and I said, okay, so what did you say, what's the secret? Because I got to duplicate this, because I still want to have, fix it. And he goes, I don't know, Yvonne, I just told my story. I'm like, oh yeah, it's experience, strength, and hope, right? And today we have 5 meetings on Sundays. We have 3 meetings on level 3. We do level 2 on Sundays, level 3. We have 3 meetings, and the guys have meetings in their own buildings, and we have a meeting on Thursday. We now have about 65 meetings going in that same institution a month. Al-Anon works. Al-Anon works. It's not easy to do intimacy with all guys. It's not easy to get them focused off the alcohol and on the insides, And so I found freedom behind the walls of a state prison because I had to take my walls down, and I identified. And again, Alateen loved me when I couldn't love myself, and they loved me when I couldn't love myself also. And they let me talk, and I started to talk, and I started to speak. And I started just to say whatever I wanted to say. When I'm on the outside, people think I'm too edgy, and I'm too this, and I'm too that, and blah, 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 blah. You used to say rough around the edges. I hope that is a little bit smoothed out. But in there, they just grin at me like, yeah, oh, fun, it's Yvonne. They never get upset. Out here, people get upset, especially Al-Anon. Alcoholics, a little bit easier. You guys are immune to us. So, there's one more story that I want to tell about experience, strength, and hope. And while I had the honor to be the sponsor for our Northern California Alateen Convention, one of the girls, her father died on that Friday. And the word was, don't talk to her about it. And she walks in as if nothing is wrong, and I'm like, whoa, that's weird. She's gonna explode or crash or something. And nobody talked to her because we knew better than that, because she's not an easy one to deal with. And so 2 o'clock in the morning, I ride the elevator just to see if I can catch somebody doing what they're not supposed to do, my favorite thing. And the elevator door opens, and she's in the elevator, and immediately, because she's always the one that is either making trouble or is in trouble. And she's like, whoa. And I'm like, whoa. I said, what are you doing here? And she goes, I'm looking for the committee suite. I'm like, yeah, I bet you are. And she goes, no, I need to talk. And I saw that her eyes were all swollen. And I said, come on. I took her to my room, and she says, Yvonne, I can't sleep because every time I close my eyes, I see my father. And I had the privilege to speak with her father several years before that, who was a qualifier in her life. And she said, I can't sleep. What do I do? I'm going crazy. So I talked to her until like 6 in the morning. And needless to say, a week and a half after that, I get a phone call at 9 o'clock in the morning. See, my parents, I hadn't seen them in 16 years, and they didn't know where I was because my father wanted to turn me into the immigration. I was illegal here for a long, long time. Not anymore, obviously, because I get clearance for the state prison. That's a whole different story. It's hard to work a program and tell the truth if you can't be that honest, because it's anonymous, but not that anonymous. And so, your father just had a major heart attack, he's brain dead, and we just pulled the plug, are you gonna come? And I hear myself say yes. And within the hour I was at the airport, and I'm flying over to the Netherlands, and I thought, who do I know there? Well, I know a lot of people there, but who do I know there? This is my home. You are my family. I'm like, I'm going so far away, I've never been so far away from you all. But because I was doing service for H&I, I was at the H&I convention, and on Friday night they had a speaker, and her name is Doris, and she's in the Spanish Big Book. And she talked about how she was incarcerated in the Netherlands. And I had the privilege to get to know her and talk to her over that weekend. And she found Alcoholics Anonymous in the Netherlands, and she got a sponsor there. And I called her number, and I was crying, and I said, Doris, I gotta go home. I said, but I'm scared, I don't know anybody there. What do I do? And I said, can I have Martha's number, which was her sponsor? And she goes, yeah, call my Martha. And so I had that number, and I go over there, and I land, and now I'm awake for 2 days, and I'm thinking, oh good, I can sleep. At least normally I could. And you know, I see my mother after 16 years, see my ex-boyfriend, I'm thinking, this is not a dream, right? Because this is not a good dream. No, it wasn't a dream. I was really gone for 16 years, and I get to see my father, that he never spoke to me again. And then I have to go to bed. And I was staying at a friend's house, and they go out to dinner, and I said, no, I gotta go to sleep. And I lay down, and all I can see is his body on that table, and I'm nuts. I am spun, and I'm nuts, and I don't know what to do. And I thought, oh, it's okay. Remember Alateen? A week and a half ago, Janae had that too. And I knew I wasn't going crazy because she had told me her experience, and I didn't know that that was an experience I needed. But you know, God gives me exactly what I need before I need it. I have everything I need right now, right here. And this is everything I have is right now, right here. And so I call that number, and I call Martha. And I said, Martha, can I speak English to you? She goes, sure. And so she speaks Dutch to me because, see, if I would speak Dutch, it would be too real. My body was there, but the rest was still in the United States, and I could not unify myself in that moment. It took me a week and a half. And that woman tells me her experience, strength, and hope. She was a dual member, yay for me, but it didn't matter. Anything with 12 steps would have worked, you know? But she tells me her experience, strength, and hope, and as curious as I am, I always wanted to know where she got, how did she get into that prison? How did she meet Doris? And you know what? For 20 minutes, I got to breathe. For half an hour, I did not have that image flashing in front of my eyes. I could breathe. And again, it's experience, strength, and hope. That's all I have, and that's all I have to give. My history today is an asset. My defects are sometimes an asset. I don't always have to pretend I know. I can say I don't know, or I haven't learned that yet. I used to tell myself I'm stupid, but I'm not stupid. I just haven't learned that yet. And that is something that I needed to learn too. And so I also learned that in service, if you tell me about it, I forget it. If you show me, I may remember. But if you involve me, I will understand. And I understand this program. This program is a part of me because I do service. And so I want to close with a little story. It's the story of Abe and Timmy. Abe was fiercely independent, even at the age of 85. But after a mild stroke, his son insisted that he move in with him. Abe missed going to the park near his old apartment. And one Saturday, he set out to find it. When Abe became disoriented, he asked the little boy where the park was. The boy named Timmy said he would like to take Abe there, but he didn't have time because he was looking for God. He needed to talk to him because his parents were getting a divorce. Maybe God's in the park. I would like to talk to him. I would like to talk to him too. Why he made me useless, Abe said. And they set off together to find God. At the park, Timmy began to cry about the divorce. And Abe lovingly held the boy's face in his hands and looked straight into his eyes. Timmy, I don't know why bad things happen, but I know it's not because of you. I know you're a good boy and your parents love you. You'll be okay. Are you sure? I'm sure. Timmy gave Abe a big hug and said, I'm so glad I met you. I think I can go now. From across the street, Timmy's mother saw them hug, and when the boy came up, she asked, who was that old man? I think he's God. Did he say that? She demanded. No, but when he told me I was going to be okay, I felt better, and only God can do that. And when Abe came home, his son was in a scolding voice said, where were you? I was in the park with God. Well, what makes you think you were in the park with God? Because he sent me a boy who needed me. And when the boy hugged me, I felt God telling me I was not useless. And when I looked up the word service, it says to be of use. So no longer am I useless because I'm of service. Thank you.